the time of year, of course, when we're taking cuttings from old geraniums, fuchsias. I brought this verbena simply because it's already flowering. And you often hear people say that you shouldn't take cuttings from flowering stems. Well, have you ever tried to take cuttings from an agaranthemum? Every stem it produces has a flower on the end of it. Which has led to a new sort of thing that we didn't used to do, is when you take these cuttings, take them with a flower on the end, but just nip the top out. And the fact of the matter is that when it then roots, you get 2 or 3 shoots growing. You don't get a leggy single shoot. You get an actually nice plant. So that's a verbena. A helenium. Now that's it's a penstemon. Another little bee that I get in my bonnet at times is when we get these lovely new plants from the garden centres. Hardy. I don't believe it. We had a range of hardy penstemons planted at Beach Grove, and I took one of each hole and planted it out. They were fine, but I lifted them, put them in a pot in the autumn, and they've been in a cold greenhouse for the winter, and I shall get some cuttings from that. So it's about how do you take cuttings and how do you handle them. Well, let me start with the old geranium because it's the simplest of all. My colleague Carol Baxter and I disagree about this. She does not like Jiffy Sevens. What did I do with them? Do you know Jiffy Sevens? They're like dried out biscuits. You know this? Have you seen them? You get them different sizes. And if you soak them in water, they imbibe the water, and lo and behold, they grow into a little self-contained pot. And for geraniums, cut it off with a. This is how my wife does all her geraniums. She's in charge of the geraniums at home. So we take a bit of a new shoot, and we remove the lower leaves, like so. Some would take off another one yet. Some people would take that one. And then take off these little, because they'll just die off anyway. Like so. And then sharp knife. Couldn't find my gardener's knife tonight, so I went into the kitchen drawer. And cutting just below a leaf joint, like so. Making a clean cut so there's no ragged edges.
Straight across? Or?
Straight across, yeah, straight across, just under the note. Hormone rooting powder? No. It certainly will cause these to rot, sorry. It's got a very fine, feathery covering of leaves that hold the moisture. Dibber is nowhere in sight, so we'll just simply use a pencil. There we go. Come on. Pop it in there. And believe it or not, our geraniums at home stand on a tray in the windowsill like that with no covering. No problems at all. In a wee tray like that, so you can put the water in and soak them up. And these will root without any difficulty whatsoever. Mostly we take cuttings that are trimmed at the node, just below the node. Like, well, that's a bit too long there. So I would be looking for something that's a little bit shorter. Fuchsia. This is a bit of a mess of that. Just about the right size for fuchsia. And can take these off, there, and there. And then fuchsias, as it so happens, are not too fussy. You could actually cut it through the middle of the stem, but as a matter of course, instead of making exceptions, just the same again. People get worried about me using the knife like that, but if you notice, when I'm doing it, I mean, if it's technique you're looking at, I'm holding the cutting there, I've got my thumb on there, and I'm using just that slicing down movement, so that my finger's not actually in the line of the blade. That's a bit chuck. Bad one. So, where did my fuchsia cutting go? That one can go into the hormone rooting powder.
At the same time.
Got it, I've hidden it. Oh, yes. Again, some people never bother because they have got very good percentages without it, but just hormone rooting powder, remove the excess, and now here's another funny thing, down the side of the pot, like so, and that would take maybe 4 cuttings round the pot. Why down the side of the pot? Well, it's a legacy of the past when we used clay pots, where there was a gaseous exchange of air through the clay pot. And so the side of the cutting was always there against the clay pot. There was a coolness about it, there was a dampness about it. We've moved to plastic pots and we still do it. It's just a hangover from that old. It's not absolutely necessary. I mean, and if you're up to trying to get many in, you can stick them in the middle, without a doubt. Now, as I say, geraniums, windowsill. Fuchsias, they need a closed atmosphere. We're talking about very soft material now. And the last thing you want is to lose moisture from the material. At one time with geraniums, the old gardeners would make the cuttings and lay them on the bench and go away for their piece and come back to allow wilting. And for some reason or other, the conditions they were using at the time, that's what worked for them. I've never had to do that. I was never ever taught to let cuttings wilt. What you'll see is in the garden, perhaps, when we're taking cuttings off plants, we pop them straight in a poly bag, close the poly bag, to keep them turgid, to keep them really nice and in good nick. So when you've got them in there, let's face it, you've just removed their food supply, which was coming from the parent plant. So you've got to keep them turgid whilst they get over the subsidy, getting cut off, whilst they start to callus and heal on the bottom. And you do that by keeping as near 100% humidity as possible in a decent temperature. And they're almost, as it were, they appear to be in suspended animation, but you're leaving them sitting there in here. But again, you have to be careful of it not having too much humidity. So, characteristically every day, you would take the lid off and leave them to breathe for a minute, changes the air, then give them a syringe over with a fine syringe of cool water, and back on with the lid. A bit of shading from strong light as well. And there you go. All the cuttings, more or less, that we have here would be about the same length and taken in the same way. Always trim off these bottom leaves so that you've got, and it stands to reason that before you actually start taking the cuttings, you've got to make sure that the plants have been watered and they're not under stress. You've got to be sure that they're not suffering from mildew or they've got green fly on them. Again, attention to detail, making sure the stock plants are. I used to go and see a guy in a previous existence who produced young geranium plants by the tens of thousands, before the days of seed geraniums, and his stock plants in huge pots, he'd expect in a season to get 20 or 30 cuttings from each plant. Well, you're only going to do that if you look after them, feed them, water them well, and keep them free from pests and diseases. If there are flowers showing in the cutting material, whether it be a geranium or an ivy leaf geranium, fuchsia, whatever, just nip the flowers out, and you're home and dry.
If you're working with people who have problems using a knife,
yes,
for taking plants, would you be quite happy with putting it on a bench?
Yeah. Again, I hadn't seen it done before, but Carol would lay the cutting on a sheet of glass and then cut with a Stanley knife or whatever. I'm always slightly concerned of bruising, but it works for her. I mean, she gets good. She gets good if they're sharp enough. Many are. I mean, when you think about it, when you take other sorts of cuttings, you quite often chop at that point later in the season. When you're dealing with very soft stuff, you've got to be that more particular. I mean, if we move the season forward to July and into August, you're taking semi-ripe cuttings and then all the way through to hardwood cuttings. The material is growing more slowly, it's more mature, it's not going to fail as quick. You know, it's got resources within it to keep it going whilst the healing process is going on. So from indoors and temperature, you could be rooting in cold frames right through, and it's all about the age of the material you're selecting.
And later in the season, when you're taking semi-ripe or hardwood,
Yes.
Is that going to take longer to root to put down roots, or?
Well, yes. I mean, basically, the classic cuttings, semi-ripe, softwood cuttings of herbaceous, and then they would start in July, and they would be planted. In the old days, they'd be planted out in a cold frame that was actually shaded from the sun with a hessian over the top. But the temperature, the ambient temperatures, and the length of day and all that sort of thing would help it. Then you go into August, and that's when you take these you take your stock plant cuttings of these, and shrubs, and you have what's known as a sun frame. You keep it closed, you keep it covered, but it's in the bright open, and the sun actually keeps the temperature up. And we're always brick built frames that held the heat. Then you would move on to conifers and ericas and other, but all outside in cold frames. Still the best. And finally, hardwood cuttings in the dormant season. And they take, well, sorry, I forgot what you were. These cuttings that you take in the late summer, all you expect them to do, July ones would be rooted by October. Now, what do? Do you leave them there, or do you lift them and pot them? Some would leave them there if it was protected and give them a liquid feed. The ones that are being put in late August, September, October, the best to expect of them is that they will callus over. And then when the temperature rises in the spring, they will put the roots on. And by about May, June, you can lift them and pot them or do what you want. Hardwood cuttings you would leave right over to the following autumn, because they're that much slower still. What did I miss out, Colin?